All right, everybody, welcome back to the ATB NFL Live Show. It's only been a couple weeks since we've been
2 weeks,
here,
2-3 weeks.
like something like that. This hasn't been that bad. It's not like we missed pretty much the entirety of the NFL offseason or anything like that. Like we would never do something like that, guys. Right?
The most important thing hasn't come yet. The draft isn't here, so
Well, Zach, we all know that you don't give a shit about that anyway. So, like, what do you? No, just no. But no,
I
yeah,
care
we
about the
are
first
back.
round and the Dolphins picks.
Okay, fair enough. But no, we are back. We're going to talk about all the stuff that we missed that we didn't talk about so far, which is again pretty much everything. We made some We had some discussions right before free agency started about what we expected, which are not. We didn't do too bad, I don't think overall. We'll talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that, but in general, we'll kind of go over a lot of the big things that have happened, what we took away from the offseason, and then we have two in particular kind of talking points that I want to spend some time on. But we'll get to that later. Tony, Zach, just overall before we get into our actual like points that we want to bring up and things we want to talk about, just want to get a quick what are your thoughts overall on how the offseason's gone from each of you? Let's start with Tony there.
Yeah, I know we didn't super intentionally take a 3 week hiatus where that
Right.
just happens, but
Yeah.
I think it's a kind of a cool way to do the off season where
It's true.
we can now just like holistically look at everything that's happened and talk
Right.
about it. And I think it's been a fun, interesting off season. There's a lot of like very telling market shifts and just movement in areas that we typically don't see movement. Certain elite positions replacing other positions on the elite positions list. Like,
Yeah.
just been an interesting offseason across the board, and teams taking extremely different approaches too. So like you see here, I have Joe Douglas is good for football. We can get into that later, but like it's cool that we have a GM who's just willing to press every possible button
Yes.
for a 1 year window. Like it's we just are seeing things that we don't typically see. We're seeing like a lot of different sides of the market. Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like the amount of moves that have happened in general, like the aggressiveness by some teams, particularly, like very refreshing. Honestly, I feel like the NFL sometimes, if there's one place that it lacks, I think it is the kind of like, wow, I can't believe this happened type of moments in the offseason. Sometimes, it varies year to year, but I think this year has definitely been pretty different for that. What do you think, Zach? Just kind of any high level thoughts on the offseason so far?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. I think there's been a lot of like, I want to say like expected and like what was like like assumed to happen has happened, but there was also some like twists and turns of some things that were not expected. I think some of the quarterback movement was absolutely like spot on to like what probably should have happened, but then there was some like added stuff, like some added trades, added things here and there that really changed the way that like it seems like some teams are looking at their quarterback room, or like certain people that they have taken on in the past. You also have like we said earlier, a lot of franchises either going in on this year or like trying to prolong a window. I think that's one thing that we saw with the Dolphins, is that they were like, hey, we can't spend all this money, but we can find worthy replacements for all the like high name profile names that are leaving for better contracts. So there's a lot of interesting things at play. It's going to be very interesting to see how like through the draft now and the rest of the offseason, how things play out.
Yeah, and again, I think that what you said about like the Dolphins, their approach, and I think Tony to a lesser extent, but similar for the Bills as well, where you guys shed a lot of high price veterans, guys that aren't quite at the same level they used to be, or just aren't on a contract that they deem worthy of the value, and are kind of trying to fill those holes in cheaper and more sustainable ways. And I think that's, and I know you're going to kind of get into it. You talked about, appreciate Tony, that you kind of have a spiel about the cap being real, as much as sometimes we think it isn't. This is the best example of that, I think, right? Of like how teams choose to allocate their resources, how they choose to attack free agency. Sometimes you can't keep all your best guys, right? Sometimes the Dolphins, you can't keep Christian Wilkins, who's going to make, you know, in the high 20s per year with with the Raiders now, and we'll talk about that probably a little bit too. And just again, it's hard to do that whenever you're trying to build a long term successful franchise. And sometimes, if we'll talk about another team that isn't trying to do anything long term, sometimes you don't care about that. You are willing to spend your money right now and do that. So we'll talk about all that. But before we get into our main talking points, like I said, Tony, what is some of your biggest actual specific takeaways from what we've seen in the offseason so far that you definitely want to take some time to talk about?
Yeah, so I think you touched on it a little bit, and we talked about it pre-show, but the cap is extremely real. And I know we did talk about this a little bit in our most recent show, and we actually touched on both the Bills and Dolphins because they had already gone through their cap shedding maneuvers
Yes,
to prep
they had already
for free agency
done a
that
lot
was
of
going
that.
to start that Monday. But it's like those two teams are the biggest example this offseason of teams finally understanding that, like, hey, if you're paying your quarterback, you have to get really stingy, and you can't be paying the luxuries that you had when your quarterback wasn't making a ton of money. So, like, positions that aren't considered, like, I said elite earlier, that, like, just those
high
top,
value,
high value, most important, like, positions. So, like, even cornerbacks kind of falling into that bucket. Like Trey White, like I love the guy to death. I'm happy he got to deal with the Rams, but like you can't have him on the books for $19 million, right?
No.
Like when you are paying Josh Allen, like 42, I think he's only 42 per year, but just the way the cap hits are stacking up.
Right.
Same thing with like the safety position. You let Micah Hyde walk. You cut Jordan Poyer. Just because you cut Mitch Morse, who is still in a great center. Like you can't be paying those luxuries anymore. You have to get it done with youth. And I know we talked about the Bills and the Dolphins last time. So the other team that I think really demonstrates this idea that the cap is extremely real, and they demonstrate it because of how conscious they are about it and how just smart they are about it. Some may call them cheap, but it is the Kansas City Chiefs. Of all of the contending teams, they have by far the healthiest cap situation right now and going into the future. And it's because they understand this at a fundamental level where, like, we're paying Patrick Mahomes a lot of money. We can afford one or two stars who really move the needle. Your Chris Joneses of the world. Jawan Taylor is a big contract, not paying off, but like you're gonna see Joe Tooney get re-upped. You're gonna see Creed Humphrey get a deal. They're probably gonna trade away Trey Smith because you can't tie up all that money in your interior. Like they are just very smart, and so they traded away L'Jarius Sneed for no value in year one of that trade. He is the best cornerback in the league. Like right now, at this time, he is the best cornerback in the league, and they value $19.2 million of cash right now over a season of his play. And like that is so telling to me that the smartest, most, just functional team in the league, they say $19 million today is more important than having that guy. And because they know they can replace that guy in the aggregate, but you have to do that. Like that $19 million has to be used very, very intelligently. And so those are kind of the three shining examples: the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Chiefs of the cap being extremely real. The Saints are another story. They're just stuck in purgatory forever because the cap is so real. Like they're committed to the roster that they have, and it's bad. But I think those three teams are a really interesting way to view it. And like shout out Chris Greer, he did the work. He built a roster this year within his constraints that is still going to be hyper competitive, and that's really hard to do, and I think it takes a lot of self-reflection as like a team builder. So I think he did well with it. I think Brandon Beane has done the right things this offseason, as much as it might piss off Bills fans. And then the Chiefs, just the shining example of just being smart about the cap. And it's so consequential, and it's so necessary.
And on top of that, them bringing in Hollywood Brown and Irv Smith Jr. is that's amazing.
Low cost dart throws, like just raise your floor without spending money.
And you know what, Irv Smith is I would say absolutely a dart throw. I do not feel like Hollywood Brown Jr. is a dart throw. He's not.
I think he's going to be a value at the price tag, but like he's Christian Kirk, and I don't think he's any better than that. And so like he's a value compared to the money being paid to Christian Kirk, but I don't want to prioritize either guy on my roster. So giving him a 1 year, $6 million deal with a little bit of upside is the right way to do it. Let him walk next offseason. You can replace that shit in the draft pretty easy.
Yeah, and I think especially in an offense and with a quarterback like Mahomes, his value is higher than it would be for some other teams, I think, too.
Definitely.
So that factors in, too. Like getting a guy like him.
He didn't play bad with Arizona when he was back with Kyler Murray. Like that wasn't bad at all.
No,
you get even better quarterback play with Patrick Mahomes. I don't feel like that's a dart throw at all.
It's a huge upgrade over MVS's role as well as the deep threat target. So like it makes sense, right? Where you're getting a guy that I think you can rely on a little bit more than some of the
Yes.
guys that they've had.
Yes.
Of course, some of the busts they've had in the room, of course, but just in general, giving him another target, because one of the criticisms of the Chiefs last year was the fact that like their downfield passing game just kind of didn't exist a lot because they didn't have guys who could win down the field consistently. Even if they
Outside of
did,
Travis Kelce.
yeah, they just didn't catch the football sometimes either. So it was like, okay, well, we're gonna.
Or sometimes they did and beat the Bills because of it.
Yes, exactly.
MVS shows up for one goddamn game every year.
Right, every year.
Or I mean,
Just
the
one
Super
guy.
Bowl. I look at the two guys that scored touchdowns in the Super Bowl. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So again, they don't need as much help as they probably gave themselves, and that's kind of the point. Is they still are trying to attack what they can attack and within their constraints. And I think obviously that you have to have a very high confidence in your coaching staff and your ability to evaluate talent in the draft to do these moves too, and feel good about it. Even if they had to do these moves, they still feel good that they're going to work out because of who they have in the building. So yeah, got to give a lot of props to those guys, to all three of those teams for sure. Zach, anything you want to talk about specifically with your takeaways?
I think it's interesting to like I said earlier, the quarterback market. There was some very, very shock moves that happened that
we'll definitely get into that. Very
Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta, Russell Wilson going to Pittsburgh. But I think it was some of the other stuff that happened as well. The trade for Justin Fields was extremely interesting. Not a wrinkle that I was expecting the Steelers to make. And that's like I don't expect Russell Wilson to be there that long. And I think the overall long-term idea is Justin Fields. So how that will happen will be interesting to see. Also, the disappearance of the 2021 quarterback class.
I think it was 2022, right?
I mean, both, really.
Both, yeah.
But
with Mac Jones getting
especially.
traded and Kenny Pickett getting traded. Like it's just like
And Sam Howell.
Dang.
And
Sam Howell as well.
Desmond Ritter. I was amazed that they got anything for Desmond Ritter. That was incredible.
But yeah, very is cool.
Very, very interesting moves in the quarterback market. Not that we had high opinions of these people. But I mean, I don't think you're ever going to see Mac Jones start a game unless Trevor Lawrence gets hurt now. And I mean, I think it's going to take a monumental. I know that there's been some, let's say rumblings in Jacksonville with how the end of the season happened, but there's no way that you can really say that you want Mac Jones under center over Trevor Lawrence. So it would take a monumental just downfall for that to happen. Kenny Pickett's not probably touching a football in years, if anything. So it's just very interesting to see some of the jump around, and with Kenny Pickett being like, oh, I'm going to be the backup to Russell Wilson. Well, no, send me somewhere else. And now he's just a backup anyways.
Whoa. That is a complete mischaracterization of what happened.
Is it not?
So Kenny Pickett had a conversation with Mike Tomlin where Mike Tomlin promised him, you will have a chance to compete to be the starter this offseason. You will have a chance to compete. And then he signed Russell Wilson, and it came out that he promised Russell Wilson the starting job and lied to Kenny Pickett's face 2 days prior. So Kenny Pickett was like, you guys, fuck you. I'll go be a backup somewhere where they're not going to lie to my face. Like, that's all that was. It was purely that he doesn't respect the people in Pittsburgh because they were wrong. Like, you can't just lie to players' face.
So
it's Kenny Pickett. You can tell him that he's benched.
Is there also the idea that, I mean, it's football, and okay, they totally could have been like, yeah, you have a chance to compete, but then 2 days later they were like, oh shit, we got Russell Wilson. Never mind, man, you're not starting. Sorry, shit happened. I mean, that is also
don't make promises that are you're so easily moved off of. Like I don't.
But I mean, you can't help what happens.
It's Russell Wilson. It's not like it's a real quarterback that he got.
It's Kenny Pickett. It's not like it's a real quarterback.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, like, if you get promised that you're gonna have a chance to
I'm
compete,
just getting
and
my
then he
ass
brings
beat
in
in this
dog
conversation,
shit
guys. Holy
that he
shit.
like makes, and he's like, yeah, this dog shit's gonna start no matter what. Like, Get out of there.
Have you guys seen that video of Kenny Pickett doing the motions for the new Madden game? And he's like, oh yeah, man, let me grab the football. They're like, oh no, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. How about you hold this clipboard first and stand on the sideline? And here, Jalen Hurts just scored a touchdown. Can we get a woo? And he's like, all right, cool. Can I grab this football? No. We're good. We don't need that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll jump in on this really quick. We're going to talk about this here in a minute. All the quarterback moves, it's going to be our first thing we kind of dive deep into. But yeah, the Steelers Kenny Pickett thing, it's deeper than what you talked about, Tony. Like there's a story that came out from Brooke Pryor, who covers the team for ESPN. And it was a little bit more complicated, but I do think that they legitimately shouldn't have handled it the way that they did. I think that there was the impression, or I think they planned on him being in a competition in some way. And for Russell Wilson, I think they wanted to bring him in. And I still think ultimately, if it would have remained that quarterback room, it would have been a competition to some degree. I think it wouldn't have been an open and shut case. But the way that it was described and the way it was talked about, it did seem like, and what I heard, the last thing that was told to Kenny Pickett was, hey, Russell Wilson's going to be in the pole position, is how Mike Tomlin described it, but you're going to have a chance to come in and compete against him still. And I guess it still didn't feel right to him, and he just wanted out, which I don't blame him for that. I will say he had a much better chance to see the field here. So if you're just trying to get on the field, I wouldn't have made that decision. I wouldn't have wanted to leave, but I also understand the slight he probably felt. So it makes total sense. But as far as I'll do a couple quick takeaways before we jump into our first main thing here. The amount of money that Calvin Ridley got from the Titans.
Yeah, that's weird.
So here's my thing. The Titans have money to spend. They really clearly, and I think that this is a lot to do with it, they want to know this year, is Will Levis real? Is he a real NFL quarterback that they can commit to some amount of time? And you get him a new center. You get him a new wide receiver that should be able to pair well with Hopkins.
Get him a new running back.
Yeah, which again,
that's a very
Pollard and Spears is an interesting backfield.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't love the fit, but I like this. I like that they're doing something.
Right. Like I appreciate the fact that they are attacking this offseason with the intent of, okay, we're going to find out if we have a quarterback this year. We might not be very good, but we're going to at least know some answers to this guy. And if they don't have an answer to that after this year, then they know they probably can move on, right? This is a second-round pick. They didn't have to spend a first-round pick on him like a lot of people thought was going to be the case for Levis. So I think it makes total sense for them to do it this way. It's just you look at that Calvin Ridley contract after the season he put up and the fact that he's 29. It is certainly – it looks bad, but I also don't know if it matters that much. Like this is a team that has money. They have a rookie quarterback that – they need to know an answer on, right? So I get it. I will say, for the Jaguars, clearly you shouldn't pay this amount of money. So I don't blame them for that. But I do wonder with bringing just Gabe Davis essentially at receiver, I think, right?
They brought Devin Duvernay in, but I don't know.
Great. Really... We're good then. Never.
Yeah.
No, I do wonder if they don't go receiver early in the draft, which they could, I'm sure at 17. I think there's going to be guys there that are at least in that range still. But man, I don't know if I love that receiving room as currently constructed.
Yeah, the funny thing is, right, like the Jags not paying that price for Calvin Ridley is probably good business. But they really wanted to pay Calvin Ridley that money.
Yes, they wanted him and Davis
fumbled
and
it
Kirk.
Because they didn't want to upgrade the 3 they're giving to Atlanta to a 2, and they just thought they were going to be okay signing him after the window opened, and then the Titans swooped in and stole him. So the Jags probably was the right move not to give Calvin Ridley that money, but the way they went about it just shows how wrong their run, right? This is Trent Baalke we're talking about. We know what we're dealing with. But and then for the Titans, I actually had one of my points is Titans attacking to learn about their QB is really cool. So it is cool. I think it is very smart. Like you said, they have the money, might as well spend it. They're going to get a franchise left tackle in the draft. They are surrounding with Will Levis with everything they could possibly surround him with, so that next year they can do whatever they want in the quarterback market if it doesn't work out, right? Like they are presenting themselves with information early so that they can make good decisions, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Calvin Ridley specifically, though, like that money is crazy.
It's a lot of money.
Like second highest guarantees for a wide receiver ever.
Yeah,
this is Calvin Ridley we're talking about.
I understand, like people will say, like, and I agree with this to a certain degree. I understand, like, inflation, the cap went up. It's not the same as like 2 years ago. I get it. I understand that. It's just you look at the deal and you're like, man, I don't know if Calvin Ridley put up this type of these type of numbers last year to warrant this. But again, when you're a team that has money to spend, you are willing to outbid other teams because of the fact you want to find out who your quarterback is. I get it. I do. Would I have maybe rather taken a receiver in the second round? Probably. In this class,
I don't think there's anything stopping them from doing that.
Right, and they still might, of course. But like, would I have rather allocated this money into something else? Now, what that would have been, I'm not sure. But like, you that's the thing. But at the end of the day, good for them by attacking the offseason the way they did. I think you're right, Tony, about this is what teams with young quarterbacks who they don't know the answer about should be doing. It's one of the reasons why I think that like the Panthers should really consider trying to figure out a way to get T. Higgins on their team. Like stuff like that. Like I understand there's elements that maybe go against that, but like you have to, when you have a young quarterback and you don't know the answer to the question of whether he's your guy, your only real concern as a GM is finding that answer out as soon as you can. That's kind of the name of the game. So I get it, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But
one other thing that I want to say, the Washington Commanders had themselves a hell of an offseason.
Emphasis on hell. Like
I don't know. There's a lot of there's a lot of promise in this area after a lot of the moves that they made. There's a lot of positive energy.
Interesting. I have like one of my bullet points is Washington really fumbled this shit.
Oh wow.
Because they just had so much money, and like I understand not swinging for the fences, and they were trying to hit singles and doubles. I just think they hit really uninspiring singles and doubles. And then also I'm baking in a lot of the draft rumors about them going Jaden Daniels over Drake May, which I think is like destroys all the goodwill that this new regime has built up. Like I don't know, just entering the offseason, we were like, they're gonna get Ben Johnson, they're gonna get Drake May, they have the most money in the league, like they are going to turn this thing around instantly. And then they didn't get that coach. They got a retread who varying levels of excitement there. They just signed anybody who had previously worked with Dan Quinn in terms of players. I think their offensive line still sucks. I don't know. I went into this offseason, like January talking, like really excited about what the Commanders could turn it around into in year one. And I am just extremely underwhelmed with what they have put together so far.
I think for me, the way I would describe it is I think they, especially after the Quinn hiring, they chose to, instead of making themselves the best team they could, they went trying to fix the culture of this franchise that has been a really big issue for a long time. And to a certain degree, I understand that. You brought in a ton of veterans who are going to be professionals, who are going to help you help guide your way out of the weird mess that you've been in for a long time as a franchise. However, like you said, Tony, this isn't like what they did. I don't think is going to really heavily impact their chances of winning games with this roster. It'll help create a floor that maybe wasn't there. I think there's going to be a level of professionalism, like I said, that is going to be refreshing for the fans and for the fan just in general. But what do we expect from them now? Like, right, what is the expectation as far as year one, especially if in the draft, like you said, if they don't take Drake May, right? Like, and I have May definitely over Daniels. I think I have him a little bit closer than some other people do, but not enough where I would consider taking him over him. But if they don't do that, right, if they take a guy that maybe isn't going to be the immediate impact that the people are hoping for, and it doesn't go super well in year one, how do people view this new regime, right? Like, how are they viewed going into year two of it? How is Dan Quinn viewed? Is he going to keep this job for very long if they're not somewhat successful early on? I don't really know what their internal expectations are. So I think based on these moves, I think it might be a little lower than we were hoping it was going to be. or maybe they understand like this is more about figuring the stuff out from year one onward and not just trying to be as good as possible in year one. But it is a very weird offseason for me. I do think the moves they made were kind of strange overall. Any thoughts there, Zach? I know you're higher on their offseason, of course. So
I agree with the culture thing, and that's a very interesting aspect of Washington, to where like that is for like a forefront issue that you have to take into consideration when talking about this franchise. Now I think that they did a lot of work with that by keeping Ron Rivera there as long as he did, because he is probably like one of the more consummate examples of being a like respectful and stand-up person. That's why I was pounding the table for, if they were going to go Dan Quinn, you might as well just brought Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick in to like establish some firm like football fundamentals and get this franchise back on track as far as like an actual football franchise. But I do think a lot of that will like be easier with some of the signings that they made, because it is a lot of veterans, like you said. I also don't think this isn't a team that needs to be like, oh, we're at the top of the AFC or the NFC East this season, because it's going to be very, very difficult. I don't want them to run the risk of becoming the next Giants, overestimating their like footstep, and then they're stuck back in being in year 1 or 2 again because they overestimated what they had. I think you have to take this really slow, specifically because you have teams like the Cowboys and the Eagles that are already so far ahead. I mean, the Eagles are constantly threatening for the Super Bowl, and the Cowboys are the Cowboys, but that's another conversation for later. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The draft stuff, I wouldn't know. I don't pay attention. All I know is that Jaden Daniels has a funky elbow, and I don't know if I would want that. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I don't necessarily think it was like a bad off season for them. I think it was a fundamentally building off season, especially in the first season, real off season for the ownership and now new GM and front office.
Yeah, overall.
I think like for me, the trenches are where I still just kind of take offense to what they did this offseason. They like that's when you're building a new regime, like I want you to build the trenches, especially like Dan Quinn should understand that. And he just brought in Dorrance Armstrong and what's his face, the other guy, he was just a Cowboy.
What position?
On the edge.
Obata?
No, he was.
Why am I blanking on this?
Clelin Ferrell?
They did bring him here.
Sorry.
Oh, Dante. You're right, Fowler. Yeah, he plays for Dan Quinn every year.
They brought in Clelin Ferrell as well.
Which
good for him getting another
I guess
job.
I haven't followed him since
he's a fine
selection.
He's a fine rotational player. He's fine.
Yeah.
And then like so yeah, I think the defensive line, they still need their top 2 pass rushers, right? Like Dorrance Armstrong is a great 3. You can say the same thing about Dante Fowler. Like a Cleveland Farrell, like also maybe a 3 or a 4. So like they still need that. Then on the offensive line, Tyler Biadasz is your big ad. Are you really is Nick Allegretti gonna start for you at guard? Like there were guys out there at relatively easy price tags.
Cornelius Lucas.
Significantly raise your floor on the offensive line, and I think you're dropping a rookie quarterback into a situation that's not good for them. With an air raid offensive coordinator too, like it just doesn't add up to me. If we don't mind, there's another NFC East team that was on my list to talk about. Zach, you mentioned them. Yeah. I think that the Cowboys are having a hilarious offseason.
Oh yeah, we need to talk about that.
What have they done?
So what have they done is a great question. Ever since Jerry Jones said that they were going all in this offseason, they have signed a long snapper and Eric Kendricks.
Yep.
Eric Kendricks, really good for a long portion of his career. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, not so much.
Granted, he's an upgrade over what they were trotting out at linebacker last year, especially after Van Der Esch unfortunately retired just due to injuries piling up.
Yeah, the next stuff, yeah.
And so I think this is the right approach this offseason, but to say you're all in, it just makes it very funny. And so why do I think it's the right approach? Within the next 14 months, the Cowboys are, granted, they could let Dak walk, but that would be extremely stupid. They are going to make Dak the highest paid QB ever, likely looking at a $60 million per year price tag. He has the most leverage of any QB. We've kind of covered this earlier this offseason. They're going to make Micah Parsons the highest paid non-QB ever. Assume $40 million on that price tag. CeeDee Lamb is going to be the second highest paid receiver in NFL history because you assume Justin Jefferson's going to get signed first, and CeeDee's not going to break that number, but he's probably going to make like $34 million per year. So they are about to tie up like $140 million in 3 players. So I understand being a little bit, not doing anything in free agency. You gotta, keep that money in your pockets because you're about to be shelling it out.
So I wanted to bring this up because I wanted to talk about the Cowboys too. I was going to bring it up if one of you guys didn't. Do you think, and like, I'm not advocating for this necessarily, just to point that out, but like, do you think that if they do not make it far in the playoffs again, do you think that there's a chance that at least one of those guys, most likely Dak, isn't coming back?
Oh,
you
yeah.
think they
100%.
Because I just feel like the problem with Dak for me is like, it's not that he shouldn't get paid. It's not that he shouldn't be the quarterback of this team. It's that if this is the ceiling of this roster, if the ceiling is you get bounced in the first or second round every year because you can't play playoff football, is there a point to continue to just kick the can down the road in a different way than the Saints do it, which is let's just keep running this back until it works? Like, we've seen this for long enough where it's like, not even trying to say it's any one person's fault. Like, it's not just Dak's fault or whoever's fault. But at some point, do you just say, are we going to pay $60 million to a quarterback that we haven't gotten to the third, like past the second round of the playoffs with? Should we just reset things while because Jerry Jones is how old now, right? Like, how old? I don't even know how old he is. Like,
I think he's like 80.
I mean, somebody was talking about this recently. Like, he's the only owner right now that people are really talking about where it's like, yo, like, you gonna make it?
Kraft is like 82, so he's older too.
But I mean, you don't have the same conversations about Kraft because
there's a reason why he did what he did this season too. We'll talk about that. But again, like, that's my thing is like, do they continue to run with this roster the way it's been? Because I don't know how much better it can be.
Oh, I think it can be much better. So, like,
when you factor in the money you're about to spend on the guys who have worked out, like how much more premium talent. I'll obviously draft and stuff like that.
I think 100%. You are 100% correct that if they get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs again, it's Dak because he's been there the longest, and I think he's going to shoulder the most of the responsibility because Micah Parsons hasn't done anything wrong. I would say he's continued to play unreal. He's the of the 3 that I think 100% you give him the money, like you set the market for his position for him because of how just absolutely insane he is. Tony, you're 100% correct where Lamb's going to get paid, but it can't break the market because he's not as good as the other people in his class or the other people getting, like, even Jamar Chase get a new contract, stuff like that.
I think he's getting second most money in the wide receiver.
Well, second most, yeah. But
he's also going to sign probably the second most rate, like right after Jefferson.
Yeah. But you can't fault him because, like, for what's happening in Dallas, because he's also doing his part when the ball is passed his way. And if we really want to be honest, the Cowboys don't have that great of a wide receiver core. It hasn't.
Just CD pretty much right now.
CeeDee Lamb, and he's been doing everything.
Tight ends have played well, but
the tight ends have played well. Yes, it all falls back on Dak. Now, I
deservedly so. I think for a lot,
not deservedly so, but out of the 3,
ultimately,
this goes back. I think now this goes back to something that I think has plagued Cowboys for so long, and it's not investing in the right players to make this go further. This goes back to the decision to not keep DeMarco Murray and let DeMarco Murray walk and keep Dez Bryant. They made the wrong decision there. That was absolutely dumb, and they should have flipped that. They should have kept DeMarco Murray and let Dez Bryant walk. It's long, but it continues to happen. And like now, you're sitting here. You've let Tony Pollard walk, and who do you have to? good decision, but who do you have to back him up to like with any sort of weapon? You just lost one of your
Who
other
would
really
be the
good,
starting running back for the
I
Cowboys
believe it's
right now?
Rico Dowdle.
Dowdle right now, but
I think
add
it's going to be a draft pick.
Name
It's gonna be a
any
draft
fourth-round
pick,
draft
yeah,
pick,
but
and they're upgrading over Tony Pollard. Like Tony Pollard was bad last year.
Yeah, he wasn't good last year, but
he couldn't punch it
But,
in
I
from
mean-
the one against anybody.
also their investments along the offensive line haven't been as good as they've been, because like they've just coasted so long
Pretty
on
much
having
just
one of
Tyler
the best offensive lines in
Zach
football,
Martin.
and it's
I'm
injuries
thinking like
and
recent history. But yeah,
injuries and other factors have really taken a hit on that. So like, no, Dak shouldn't be the one to get the axe for this, but he's going to be, because he's the one that's going to shoulder most of the responsibility because of the position.
He's going to be, because Jerry Jones can't fire himself, and
he
he
can't
is
fire
the problem.
himself. Yeah,
Yeah. So I think the history has told us you can afford to pay a quarterback, a wide receiver, and an edge rusher top market deals and build the rest of your roster as long as you draft well. Key, you have to draft well, and you have to understand where to allocate your resources.
Yeah.
So the issue with the Cowboys last year, let's look at it, was that they didn't have a run defense. They drafted a really good run-stopping one tech and told him to drop 40 pounds and make him play three tech. And you know what? The run defense sucked. And also, they invested in like 220-pound linebackers, not real players. And so Aaron Jones goes for like $180 against them and beats them in their own house in the wild card round. So like, why are they getting bounced in the playoffs year in and year out? It's not because they have a really good quarterback and a really good wide receiver and a really good edge rusher. No, it's because they don't have anything else. And why don't they have anything else? Because Jerry's a fucking idiot. And he just doesn't know how to run a team. So, like, I agree with you guys that I think Jerry is going to ask himself that question. Like, oh, if we keep doing this, why should I pay this guy $60 million? Well, you should pay this guy $60 million because he's one of, like, 6 quarterbacks in the league who can will his team to a Super Bowl. He's worth $60 million. It's just that if you can't build the roster worthy of that Super Bowl, he's not going to win the Super Bowl for you. And so that's the issue with the Cowboys, is that they have just not added the right supporting pieces, like the receiver core, like you guys mentioned, the defensive line outside of Parsons, the linebacker core, like it's all just subpar. And now they're letting Tyron Smith walk. They're letting Tyler Biadasz walk. They don't have replacements for those guys. Terrence Steele was pretty bad coming off injury last year.
Not great.
You got 2 elite guards. Maybe you kick Smith out to tackle and draft an interior guy. Like,
they're gonna probably have to do that. I think realistically.
Yeah, like it just very much feels like last year was the year, and they brought in the right guy and then just did the dumbest shit. Like, Mozzie Smith was a good pick. I just don't understand telling him to drop all that weight. And
Defensive Player of the Year.
Like,
Defensive Rookie of the Year shares.
Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, oof. I think we all had some pretty ugly picks in that one. I definitely had Emmanuel Forbes.
Yeah. I forget what mine were, but yeah.
I think I also had Will Anderson, so I win. But
I think I had who was it that I had? I don't remember. It doesn't matter. But yeah, you're right. He had a good season.
He actually had a good season.
Had a good season.
I
was happy.
Durant, nobody had him, but
I liked
Kobe
him,
Turner,
but I didn't
Kobe
think
Turner is
I didn't think that he was going to play as much as he did either. So that's kind of my thing. But it was good thing he did, because guess what? He's the only guy there now. But no,
just wait for Byron Murphy to show up.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that we should definitely get into. Again, we're pretty far in the show. We'll get our first main topic in. Talking about quarterbacks, we just were obviously not talking about Dak because we don't know what's going to happen there at this point. But a lot of quarterback movement this offseason, for sure. A lot of very interesting moves, I would say. Some that are more kind of what we expected might happen, especially the biggest domino, I think, is something that I know at least I expected to happen. Some stuff with my team that I will definitely give my spiel on, of course, because, if we kind of have to. Let's start with a big one, right? Kirk Cousins to the Falcons on a 4-year, $180 million deal with, I think it was $100 million guaranteed, right? 90 guaranteed to sign. So, again, this is what I expected to happen with Kirk. I did think he was going to leave Minnesota, and I did think it was going to be for Atlanta. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But I do want to give you guys a chance to kind of give your spiel on it. Zach, let me actually start with you this time. What do you think about this move for the Falcons and for Kirk, honestly?
I don't think it's bad at all. I mean, Kirk Cousins is the premier bag getter in the NFL.
Hall of
And
Famer just from that alone. I
he
think you
did
need
it
to give it
again.
away.
You rascally son of a gun, you did it again. Um, I mean, it's an immediate upgrade for Atlanta.
You think so?
I mean, I mean, it has to be. They actually trust the quarterback to throw the ball now.
Huge upgrade.
I was so right about Desmond Ridder. I'd feel bad for him because I didn't want to be right because I never want a player to be bad. But God, he was bad.
I mean, yeah, he was
Yeah.
downright awful.
Okay,
It was bad. And I think a lot of the other signings for them, it's going to be interesting to see how they turn out this season, because they really they kind of kept it a little low key. I mean, you have to when you give Kirk Cousins $180 million.
Yeah.
But bringing in Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod,
Former Steeler, woo.
yeah, there's some gems there. But they finally, I feel like the bigger thing. Oh, and Rondale Moore. So
Thank you,
they.
Desmond Ridder.
Yeah, for Desmond Ridder. They have the offensive weapons to just make an impact right now. They should be focusing heavily on the defense with their draft. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
All right, what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Their offense on paper, and I assume it'll play out this way because Zach Robinson, great offensive coordinator. Kirk's familiar with the system.
Yep.
I think he'll be a great offensive coordinator. I guess we haven't actually seen.
But I think so too.
Yeah,
but yeah,
there's enough trust there to feel good about it. But yeah, the weapons are excellent. Granted, I thought the Mooney signing was very rich. I would cap him at $8 million. Like I don't know. He was deserving of that Marquise Brown flyer deal.
I think that he played better than his numbers. He played better than his numbers. I think it's just Fields didn't target where he ran routes. It just
I would have liked to see a different name there. But
regardless,
that's fine. I think the offense has been built up in a way, like we know the offensive line, granted it took a step back last year, but we know it's got really good players on it. You assume with a more functional scheme, with a more congruent personnel, like it'll be better. And then defensively, I think they the defense solid floor. Moving on from Ryan Nielsen, that changes the shape of things a little bit, but I think Jimmy Lake is a good defensive coordinator, good potential defensive coordinator. And so it's really just invest in the pass rush because that you have a couple B's, you need an A, and then I invest in a corner too because why not have 2 lockdown corners instead of just one? But that is where their attention should be because the offense is going to be good, and in the division they're in, it makes sense to do this deal. I have in my notes under Kirk, Atlanta buying in makes way more sense than Minnesota continuing the Kirk thing because of where they are and who they're competing with. It makes way more sense. You have a path, and the Lions laid this out perfectly last year. You don't need an A+ at quarterback if you have a really good roster and you're in the NFC. They are going to host a playoff game, and would it shock anybody if they were up a couple touchdowns on the 49ers in the NFC Championship game this upcoming year just because of the way the bounces in the NFC go? No, I think this was smart where they are. Minnesota, on the flip side, they wouldn't have made much sense to pay Kirk because you need to you're about to start paying Justin Jefferson. You brought in a strong rookie wide receiver opposite him, but they need to bring in the rookie. So it's just cool to see Kirk keeps Kirking, but the teams change because of what team makes sense to have the Kirk at that point in time. So I thought it was cool.
I think it's funny too that you call it Kirking because it gets that big deal. I think you also Christian Kirk can also kind of fall in this category. So it's just Kirking is just that's what you should be doing in the NFL, or maybe just have Kirk in your name somewhere. People are like I know that guy.
Christian Kirksey, he needs to make a comeback.
Yeah, right there you go. He should have made way more money than he made from what we could tell. But no, I think in general this move makes total sense. Like I said, I think that this was the right fit for him. I think it was the right decision from both sides. Like you mentioned, I think Minnesota, it was time for them to move in a more healthy direction from a roster building standpoint, from a upside standpoint. They kind of ran this train out, right? And I think that, it's not that Kirk wasn't good enough or anything. It's just things didn't happen the way that they needed to. Obviously, the Giants playoff game is really disappointing. That one hurts a lot, especially because I did think both of those teams were frauds, and so far I appear to be correct about that.
Yes, you were.
But I just think the Vikings, they needed fresh blood, right? They need something to kind of elevate this team, hopefully, into the future. And
Jaron Hall.
Yeah, Jaron Hall. No, I will say I don't know who that's going to be at this point. I assume
Sam
it's going
Darnold.
to be
Sam Darnold.
Sam Darnold. Listen, if Sam Darnold turns into something with Minnesota, give Kevin O'Connell whatever amount of money you want.
Does that mean that he gets comeback player of the year?
Yeah, but technically being asked is all you need to do to get comeback player of the year.
I personally feel like that is comeback player of the year worthy. If you were shit before and then all of a sudden you play well, that is comeback player of the year.
I think it matters why you were bad, but also, yeah, I guess that
is making a comeback. Like
right. Yeah, I get it. Anyway, point is, in that division too, if you're talking about the Falcons here, we all very much undersold the Bucs, but I also understand that there is a chance that the Baker Mayfield experience goes back the other way, right? I don't think it's going to, at least not to the extent that it was with like the Panthers and stuff like that. But there's a chance that they don't repeat that success, right? Like this, it's just definitely possible. Doesn't
especially
even if
with
they
Canales leaving, like
right, and even if they do repeat their success, doesn't mean the Falcons won't be better than them. Like I think that their roster is better. I think
8. Like
right, and I think
the Falcons can win 11, 12 games with this roster.
I really think they can. They can, yeah, and I think this is really also. I don't even want to invoke his name because the fantasy community might like show up to my house, but like maybe Kyle Pitts is back on the menu a little bit. You know, maybe
he's 100% back on the menu.
Right?
We're going to use him correctly.
Here's the thing, though, is like I don't trust it because I've been burned twice now, Tony. But no,
I'm
I do
not
think
buying in on fantasy.
No,
but it's going to work.
No, it's going to work out. Yeah, London for sure should be much more valuable as well. Just this entire receiving core takes Bijan as well. Yeah, I mean, if he plays anything like Dalvin Cook did for the Vikings in that game, like for Kevin, I think it'll be great, especially because Cook did that kind of while being washed a little bit last year, like in 2022. So overall, this offense should be really, really good. I think the defense does certainly need help in this draft. I think if they want to maximize this window, they need to hit on their draft picks as far as on defense. Maybe that means edge at 8. Maybe they trade down a little bit and pick up a corner, some other picks to do that. I like Ebiketie as an edge. I think they need to play him as an actual edge more. That was kind of the issue last year at times, where I don't really think they did that enough.
Yeah, he didn't make a ton of sense in the Nielsen mold,
he did.
I think in this Jimmy Lake defense, he probably makes a bit more sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So you hope you can get more out of him, but still more pass rush is needed. Probably needs some more help in the secondary opposite Terrell for sure. Just again, if you can address those needs, though, you'll be in good shape. I think they're going to definitely be the favorite for sure in the NFC South, and maybe one of the favorites in the NFC, depending on how things shake out during the year. So we'll see. Let's just talk about this because this is kind of the second biggest what the hell's going on with the quarterback situation team. All right, so my Steelers. So they decide to give Russell Wilson, granted, a nothing contract. He's getting paid by the Broncos to not play for them, which is kind of an indictment, of course, on him, but it also means that you don't really have to pay him any money, which is fine.
It's an indictment on the Broncos for handing him that contract.
Well, there's that. That is certainly an element of it, too. But, I mean, you also did just spend all that draft capital. I think they expected this not to go this way, but still. Certainly the case. I will not blame you for that. But you pay him $1.2 million to be the presumed starter, of course, which pisses Kenny Pickett off to the point where he's like, send me across the state where I was a fan of the team anyway when I was younger.
And I'll still be a backup.
Yes, still be a backup. Also,
a backup who's going to win more games.
Yes. I don't know. Point is, they get rid of Kenny Pickett, of course, at his request, which, again, at this point, I don't care. I'm kind of glad that they accepted that it wasn't going to work out to a certain element of that. So, I'm okay with that. And then they do make the trade for Justin Fields. So they get the two most popular quarterback choices that people were pegging for them in the offseason at the same time. Very interesting. Also getting him for, at worst, at most like a 4th, I think, next year is the most it could be. Based on the conditions of that trade, it's a 6th if he doesn't play really at all, I guess. So I'm going to let you guys kind of what is your overall thoughts on the decision making for as far as the quarterback position with the Steelers first? What do you think, Tony?
As much as I don't believe in either player they brought in, I I'm in love with the process. And I've done a bit of I wouldn't call it a 180. I still think signing Russ at $1.2 million is probably a net negative to your team. But I understand like the process of just churning to find something that works, because the Steelers are a somewhat unique team in that their quarterback floor matters more than their quarterback ceiling. And so churning to try to figure out that what makes sense there while not being committed out in the future is just the right way to approach this, right? Like, I think they are hoping that Justin Fields proves to be worthy of a Jordan Love extension so that they can try to they can buy another year with him to see if it is the long-term answer. But they are also prepared for the reality where if both of those guys walk next season, they're not losing, right? Like, I think they've well positioned themselves to not be committed to a bad answer. They don't have a good answer yet, but they're not committed to a bad answer, which I think a lot of teams are committed to a bad answer. And so, like, I respect the process. I don't think the ceiling is all that high. I do think that Russ will play less or start less games than Fields will, just because, like, we're gonna find out really early that Russ is still Russ, and why not inject Justin Fields and start going with, like, just invest in the run game. Like, we could see a very run dominant offense the way they're building this thing. So I respect their process. I don't think either player is going to be there more than this year, but I respect the process, and I think they are flexible, which is what you want to be when you don't have a good quarterback yet.
Fair enough. So what do you think, Zach, before I give my spiel here?
Russell Wilson gave them an excuse to get Kenny Pickett out of there, and I think that the sooner that Justin Fields takes over, the better that this team looks. And nothing against Russell Wilson, because I don't necessarily think that he is washed in the right situation, but this is not the situation for him. Especially, and I mean, nothing against George Pickens, but like, your top three receivers are George Pickens, Van Jefferson, and Calvin Austin III. That's not fantastic. That's not
good.
That's not Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. That's not even Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. Like, you're asking Russell Wilson to do far more than any point in his career with the weapons at his disposal. And I don't think in 2024, this is the time to do that. Now, I think one of the most interesting signings that they made was Cordero Patterson. And that would be very
new kickoff rules go, Burr.
Yes, that is also something that is very cool. I like that they did that.
I did too. Yeah.
But yeah,
it's the team's alive, baby.
It's I don't know what the Steelers are doing is the thing. Because the problem is that the team is too competitive to get too high of a draft pick to do anything to like really tear it all down. And like, Mike Tomlin's not going to ever be in the position to tear it all down because he won't want to. You're kind of stuck in a Tennessee scenario where if you want to bring in somebody, like, you're going to have to let him go, not because your team isn't successful, but because you need somebody who's going to be able to sit there through a rebuild. And I don't think Mike Tomlin's going to want to do that. So they're reaching not necessarily at a salary cap space, but sort of like a holding on for dear life. They're starting to reach a state of desperation as the Saints. And it's going to get to a point where they just need to let it go.
So let me...
sorry. I'm looking at their cap space next year. Going to my flexibility point, if Dak does walk, they are the team that is going to sign him to $60+ million a year, and that is how you get your Super Bowl caliber quarterback onto an already good roster. Like, that's why I love the flexibility approach, because things happen. They might be able to land the plane next offseason.
Interesting thing to consider. So
does Mike Tomlin last if they don't post a winning season?
I mean, he never has failed to, so I doubt that will happen.
But I'm saying, if this is I mean,
coming to fruition.
Well, I know I'm saying, but like, if this is, I mean, with how bad the offense looks on paper, is if he does it this year, does that before they even have the chance
I
to
don't.
get
I don't
back?
personally think so. No,
I don't think it should,
he's-
but
No, I just don't think that they'll do it. Ownership.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Steelers have had what 3 coaches in the last like 100 years. I
Feels
feel
like
like
it.
they'll stick it
Yeah,
out.
feels like it. Yeah. All right. So let me give you guys a look into the mind of a Steelers fan for a second, which I know sounds scary. Trust me, I know
it sounds terrifying because you
but
guys had faith in Matt Canada last offseason.
I didn't.
Well, you didn't.
You were
but-
early on the Fire Canada train.
Yeah,
I was on the Fire Cannon train halfway through 2022.
Yep.
So I don't want to hear nothing about Matt Canada at this point. I already said my piece on that, man. But my thought process with the quarterback position this year is kind of similar to you, Tony, where it's like there's no real downside to this. Like this move essentially gives you, I think, a higher floor at quarterback, which is kind of like you were saying, Tony, what they need.
It's a low
'Cause I
bar,
think
but higher floor.
The combination of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields is certainly more capable than what we've had at the quarterback room pretty much since like even maybe before like the year before Ben retired. Honestly, let's be honest about that. His last year was honestly sad to watch at times. But the point is like these two guys give you some amount of playmaking upside, even at his age. I think Wilson gives you more playmaking upside than a Pickett or obviously a Rudolph. Fields certainly does. It gives you that layer of like, okay, there's at least a potential where if the play doesn't go as called, there's something might happen that's good. Whereas Kenny was basically like, oh, I'm about to get sacked. Let me just do a spin into the pressure and die, basically, which was still the thing I couldn't understand with him is like, dude, just like stop blindly turning left and getting your ass handed to you. It's like
Wait
at
till
some
you
point,
watch Justin Fields.
right? Which I get that, but like he at least might be able to run away from guys, whereas Kenny's just dying essentially every play. But ultimately, I don't think that either of these guys are the answer, right? Like I don't think so. I think Fields has the potential to give them pause and make them give him a contract in 2025 to actually show it in a full season, especially if they don't have another answer that's better. But realistically, this move was made because Tomlin doesn't think that, and Colin doesn't think that the quarterback room last year is good enough, and they're right. Like the fact that Kenny Pickett had a well above like 500 record has nothing to do with Kenny Pickett as a quarterback. It has everything to do with this roster, with Mike Tomlin, with Omar Khan, what he's done drafting players so far. It has all to do with that. And I think that they understand that and they realize, okay, if we bring in a veteran like Russell Wilson, yes, is he kind of bad now? Sure. Not very good, but he's still a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett realistically. So is Justin Fields for all the things he does do well, despite his negatives as well. They provide more offensive firepower. Is that firepower high? No. Is it something opposed to nothing? Probably. The other thing I will say with this that is a little confusing, and granted, I don't care as much about this because I don't know how long he'll be here anyway, and I don't know if it's really that big of a deal because it's still going to be better than whatever Matt Canada and the combination of guys last year were doing. These two do not fit at least the profile of an Arthur Smith quarterback in terms of where they attack with the football, especially in the passing game. Arthur Smith loves throwing the ball over the middle of the field. He's one of the guys that calls plays there more than anyone else does. Quarterbacks for him have targeted in like the 15 to 18% mark the last like 4 or 5 years. These two guys are about as poor for that fit as you can get in the NFL. Russell Wilson just doesn't throw there, and when Fields throws there, it doesn't go well. So it's kind of like, is Arthur Smith going to switch that up a little bit? Is he going to change his offense to a certain degree? I will say the one
he's
thing
going to look at them
that,
both.
yeah,
do it.
Right, pretty much. Which again, probably won't happen realistically, especially with Fields. Like I just don't think he sees the field well there. I will say the downfield passing game and the run game. If we're talking about a fit here, that would be Fields because he's an element in the running game, and when he does play well, it's usually throwing the ball down the field. He was one of the highest graded passers down the field last year. That's where he feels comfortable attacking. If they can lean on those two things with him, and I think Russell too, because he does still have the moon ball thing going for him. We know that about him. The moon ball to Pickens, if he does play, is probably going to create a couple spectacular plays, and it's great, whatever. There's at least potential for explosives here that they didn't have with the old offense. Like Fields as a runner and as a passer down the field, Wilson as a passer down the field. Like there's more potential for that. But this still comes down to the run game has to be dominant again, and I think it will be. And I also think that the defense still has to be the defense. this is a team that's probably going to win 10 games and lose in the first round. It's still the same ceiling they had this past year, but it's going to be more fun for me to watch, at least, probably, and at least more interesting because, man, maybe Russell Wilson starts off hot and then he hits a wall, and then they bring Fields in, inject some life into the offense, and they go on a run down the stretch and win like 7 of 8 games, and then they play the Bills again in the playoffs, and we get our asses handed to us again. Like, thanks for that, by the way. You guys should win. The point is
talking about running quarterbacks that 60-yard
yeah, right, yeah. Still so funny. Yeah,
my girlfriend is making bacon right now, and it smells incredible in here.
Nice.
Oh my gosh,
it's always good. But again, like, as a Steelers fan, these moves don't do much for me because I know that the ceiling is similar. I think that it buys them another year of competitiveness to a certain degree. Like you said, Tony, maybe that means that next year someone pops open, whether that's Dak, which I'll be honest with you, the fan base will never recover from them paying him money. I just will tell you that. I know that they do not like him in general. That will go very far.
If it turned into a Super Bowl?
Probably.
That's what you open the window for.
Yeah, probably. But I'm just saying, I think it'll be very funny because they'll be like, we got the Cowboys quarterback. We're going to lose 12 games next year.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever that ultimately means, and you brought up a point, Zach, that is kind of the crux of this issue. And I actually did, if you guys, I think I told you about it when I did it. I did a whole piece during the season last year about why the Steelers are in the position that they're in, where they continue to be in this kind of the same range of team every year, is they are too good to get the high-level players, especially at quarterback, they need to elevate themselves. But they're also not good enough to get away with not having that player, right? They need that premium player at quarterback, or at least one that's good enough that they can actually expect them to win games for them when the defense can't. They can expect a certain level of competency.
What, the last time you guys got one was when you traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Right. And again, we had to do that instead of draft somebody, right? If you wanted a premium player, you had to go spend draft capital on them. At quarterback, you have to get lucky, honestly, to draft a guy that's not in the first 10 picks and have them work out. Like, there's examples of it, of course, but like, it just doesn't happen as much, right? You're not guaranteed. We just did it with Pickett. Now, granted, they were smart enough to move on from him very quickly, and I appreciate that from them. But it's just hard to take guys that aren't the premium players and expect them to become premium players. So that's what it always falls down to.
Do you think the Pickett experiment would have been different if you had taken him in the second round instead of the first?
I mean, it would have ultimately ended the same, I think. So, I mean, we would have had a different player in the first round, which may have helped, depending on who we would have taken. But I also think, like, it was never going to work out with Matt Canada. Like, I don't think having a different offensive coordinator would have truly changed things, but it would have been different to a certain degree.
I always there's an example there of like Tebow. I think if Tebow had been drafted in the second round, things would have been a lot different because the expectations would not have been as high as being a first round quarterback. There's would be a longer leash. And I think the same with Pickett. If he had been drafted more so as to where his actual ADP was, as opposed to being a reach in the first round to have the hometown quarterback play with the Steelers. There might have been a bit more like not from the beginning of like, oh, you have to come in and be the guy. You have to come in and take over right now.
I think with quarterback though, like that kind of just doesn't happen. Like,
well, but see, that's the problem is
you're not. And like,
besides Joe Burrow and like Tua and Herbert right now. All the success stories, you get to watch them sit. Patrick Mahomes sat for a year. Jordan Love sat. All these quarterbacks who are like having some decent success in the back. Tom Brady got to sit. Like, there was never this expectation of like immediately throwing a rookie quarterback in, because there is an extent of that you need to learn how to play the NFL game. Now, there are different situations, absolutely, but like Stroud was able to step in last year and that was different. But look at Bryce Young. He's having a horrific time. I think Bryce Young getting the chance to actually sit for a little bit, put somebody else in to take the horrificness of what that roster was. That's going to be so much better for his long-term development as a quarterback in the NFL. There's just like so many examples of that being the example, but then all these franchises that get the top picks need somebody to start immediately and want to see the winning, that they're fine with just throwing the quarterback to the wolves. Even if they look like they're going to be able to step in right away, there is still like a step that they have to take in order to like be ready. So like yes, some of these quarterbacks that get drafted in the first round, can they do it? Absolutely. But is it fair to assume that they're just going to be able to step into the position and succeed immediately? And that's the expectation? I don't necessarily think so, because some of the greatest have had the opportunity to sit and learn and like take not be the first person to be thrown in and just be like, oh, cool. Yeah, do it.
So I guess I just don't understand. So like if they took Kenny Pickett in the second instead of taking him 20th overall, what about the Steelers is different today? Outside of they probably have Trent McDuffie on their team, or Tyler Smith. Sorry, I looked up the draft. I had to.
Yeah.
I mean, you end up getting a better pick in the first round that could set up for a better. I mean, it's the reach.
So like, how is their quarterback situation helped at all by that? Like, they still don't have one.
Yeah, I think. Here's the problem, Zach, because I think I understand where you're getting at. Like, I think ideally a lot of quarterbacks probably could benefit from not playing the second they get in the league, because it's very difficult to do that. The problem is there's a difference between like starting a guy and he looks like Zach Wilson and starting a guy and looks like Trevor Lawrence, where it's like Trevor Lawrence's rookie year was horrendous in terms of like statistically and the way the season went, and Urban Meyer was a disaster. But you saw why he was the first overall pick.
Yeah.
Like, you saw the elements of that. With Zach Wilson, you didn't see that. Like, there was no like, oh man, like there's a lot of flashes here that are like, this could be a high level. Like, it was pretty apparent quickly that he didn't have it. And I think with Pickett, to a certain degree, that's also the case. I think he had a higher floor than like a Wilson or some of those. Like, I think he was competent at times, but there was never a moment where you're like, okay, this is the guy. Like, you never saw it. And that's the difference, is like, even with Bryce Young, like, it's going to be difficult for them to kind of climb out of this, because that was a horrendous situation. Like, it was not going to go well. But you would have liked to still see some more flashes from him than you did. And I think that's what they're going to evaluate this year and probably the year after that. Like, that's what his window is. You want to see the reason you drafted them in the first round. If you don't see that, then it becomes a question of how long are you going to let him go out there? Because if you don't see those things, the situation matters, but it doesn't matter as much as them still proving that the talent level they expected to have was there. And with guys like Wilson, like I mentioned, and other guys in the past, like, you need to see it at some point, and a lot of the guys don't show it. And the guys who do, they get chances to keep going out there and do it, right? So it's difficult. It's not fair in some cases, I do think, because it is something where like you'd rather them get a chance to sit. Jordan Love, I'm sure, loves that he got to sit now, right? Like, I'm sure he looks at that as like, yeah, I didn't get to play him the first couple of years, but I'm a much better quarterback for it. Same thing with Mahomes. Like, he probably wasn't like would he have been successful his first year? Yeah, because the team was really good and play calling was good, but maybe he wouldn't have developed as well, going into his second season and winning an MVP in year two, with all the things he did. So it's certainly a conversation. And I think for some of these teams, like, I think that's one of the reasons the Patriots, even if they do take a quarterback at 3, we might not see that guy, because Jacoby Brissett is a totally like fair, competent quarterback to go out there and play. So even if they take even if Daniels is the second pick and they take Drake May, does Drake May have to sit? Probably not. I think he's a good enough playmaker to come in and do stuff right away, but he doesn't have to play that. Like, if they don't want to play him, if they don't think he's ready, they have a quarterback that's in place. With the Commanders, whoever you take it to starting from day one, like he is. Like, so same thing with the Bears. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. So it's tough, but I understand where you're coming from. Same thing with the Vikings. I want to talk about their moves. So they get Sam Darnold for, what was it, 1 year, $10 million?
Yeah, it's a true $10 million.
Yeah, I know. The NFL can't quit Sam Darnold, man. I'll tell you what. He's still 21 years old, guys, I think, right? It's like the Jason Tatum meme, if you guys like, where it's like he's still 21 years. Like, it always seems like he's younger than everyone.
I know this is a joke, but is he younger than Kenny Pickett?
He is, I think, or close to it. I think they're about the same age. Yeah,
he's 26. He was born in 97.
So they're roughly, because I think Pickett's 25 right now, going to be 26. So they're very close in age. Yes.
Hey, he has the same birthday as my sister. Not like exactly, but like June 6th.
Nice.
Or
no, June 5th. June 5th. My bad. June 5th.
Damn it.
I had it flipped. June 5th. June 5th.
Damn. But that's an interesting move, simply because like who the quarterback is going to be with Vikings seems very likely it's going to be JJ McCarthy from everything that we've seen.
Kenny Pickett was born on June 6th.
A lot of June birthdays here. No, but like I assume that if they do get a quarterback early, which is what they're priming to go up for, I don't think it's going to be one of the top three guys because I just don't think that they're going to allow them to do that. Maybe the Patriots would if it's Daniels that is staring at. But I also think that even though I think Daniels is a more talented player, McCarthy is a better fit probably for the Vikings offense. So like I don't know what to make of it. All I know is whoever they bring in probably isn't going to be a guy I'd want to start right away. So I
They
think
have
that
2
Darnold,
first round picks, so
they're going to move up for somebody,
yeah,
unless someone jumps them or something.
because it's either that or because their next pick is in the 4th round.
Yeah, they gave
so,
up stuff to
yeah. So it's going to be interesting. I see. I didn't think Sam Darnold was going to end up here. I thought Sam Darnold was going to end up in freaking Denver. After Sean Payton,
Denver thought that was going to happen too.
Yeah, because Sean Payton was talking him up like crazy. He was like, "Oh yeah, give me Sam Darnold, give me Sam Darnold," and I was like, "What? What is going on right now? Like, you've got to be kidding me." I could see him just ending up starting. I mean,
I think so. If they bring in a
rookie, JJ, they should start Darnold.
Yeah,
just because JJ's so young.
Yeah,
I do think that they are of the belief that they have a pathway to get Drake May. I don't care about the Josh McCown connection. Like I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. We did this last year with the Josh McCown CJ Stroud thing. That doesn't matter. Josh McCown agnostic. I think they want May, and I think he's a perfect fit for the offense. Yeah. And I do. So I've said, I think the Commanders are picking Jaden Daniels. That sounds like it's what's
funky
happening.
Elbow and all.
Yeah.
And so I don't think the Patriots are taking a quarterback at 3. I don't think the Patriots are picking at 3. So if it goes Caleb, Jaden,
I would love it.
The Vikings are coming in number 3, and they're taking Drake May, and they are going to be absurdly good right off the bat.
Yeah, I would love that if they did that. I just until they don't, I cannot. Even though again, like I don't have them as big of a gap as some people do. Until they don't take Drake May, I won't believe it, and it's simply because I can't imagine a team. Now, granted, I shouldn't say this because teams take. Like they do stupid stuff.
Zach Wilson went 2nd overall.
I know exactly. So like I get it, but
I mean, there's a lot of things in the name of quarterbacks that have happened.
Exactly.
Now, and see, here's the thing: is like we're talking about the Commanders like messing up the pick, and here I was in 2018 when Haskins fell to them, and I was like, "What deal with the devil did they sign for this to happen?" And there's just always this worry that when it comes to Washington that they're just going to mess up the quarterback selection.
Yeah.
And like even if it's just sitting in their lap, like
that's my thing is I'm going to believe that they're going to take Drake May until they don't. However, if they don't, you're right. The Patriots should take him, in my opinion, just because you won't get that opportunity to take a quarterback of his caliber very often.
They will.
But But my point is, like, if they don't, yeah. Well, I don't think the quarterbacks are as good next year. We'll see if that happens. But the point is like, if they don't want to take a quarterback at 3, you're right. The Vikings better trade up to 3. Certainly, someone should at least if it's not them, but I assume it would be them, and take Drake May. If that happens, then Sam Darnold will probably get we're gonna let him compete for a little bit, like they always say with every quarterback, like, we don't, and then he's gonna play right away because it's.
Do we not think that the Giants don't do whatever they can to also try to move up?
I don't know. I don't know.
They're doing all their homework, but it sounds like they're not willing to trade up. Like it sounds like if JJ's there, sure. But
or whatever is there.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying if May's there, like if May's at 3, like
I don't know.
There's after swinging
Daniel
and missing,
Jones.
Well, no, as after swinging and missing so badly on Jones, that's the way to like swing the fans back to your side is like go get the number 2 overall guy. I mean, you're in division rival messed up and pick the wrong quarterback, and now you're going to show them exactly why they should have picked the other guy. I mean, it's almost too perfect. But I also see exactly why it wouldn't happen as well. I don't know. There's just so many players at the top of this draft that it's like, what is going to happen? Because like just as easily for some of these teams to take a quarterback, you could also easily be looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. and being like, oh my God, like this is game changer. This is also game changer. Like there's just so many different avenues for these teams to go.
Yeah, it's true. The quarterback drafts and how they go is definitely going to be very interesting.
Because there's going to be like one or two starters coming out of the top of round 2 that are much better players than the guys drafted at the top of round 1. The tier 2 of this quarterback draft is.
Oh no, we also haven't talked about how Penix put him into it almost solidified his round 1 selection.
You just call him
Penix? Is that not how? Is that how? I don't know how to say it. It's what?
Penix.
Penix? I thought it was Penix.
Yeah. Penix would be too on the nose. I'm glad zero chance he goes round 1. That
I don't think
too banged up. Like
even with the 40 time.
The 40 time doesn't
mean
anything.
40 time was misreported, and then he's not a mobile guy. He has a collective 15 rushing yards to his name.
Yeah,
so did Justin Herbert until the Rose Bowl, his last game.
Well,
and how is he a mobile quarterback? No,
no, he is. They just don't do it.
That's the point, though.
Penix is very much a statue in the.
He does not play the way if his speed is even close to what they reported, which I think ended up being 4.5 something. It doesn't matter because he doesn't play that way. He doesn't use that part of his game, so it doesn't really matter.
No NFL team would want him to play that way because of the knee injuries. He's not long in the
mispronouncing his name. You can tell I don't know how much
about
him.
Yeah, the point is the quarterbacks that are in the second tier of this draft are certainly a different level than normal for sure, and it makes me wonder. If Sean, this is not a conversation for you, Zach, so Mark Benton or some of this, but I could see Sean Payton being like Bo Nix at 12. I'm
expecting Penix or Nix to Bo Nix for a while.
That would be better for sure, but it'd be funny if he was just like, well, the other guys are gone. Welcome Bo Nix to the Broncos at 12.
Who's starting for them right now?
Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah, under our QB movement header in my Google Doc, I do have just a single bullet point that says, "What the fuck, Denver?"
Denver was like, "What if we don't do anything and just let the cards fall as they will?"
I mean, Washington kind of did the same thing, except they sent.
They have number 2. They have the second pick.
They have
Zach.
I know, but they still only have 2 quarterbacks on the roster. It's just kind of still also
that's enough. Speaking of which, let's do Desmond Ridder and Cardinals doesn't mean anything to me. I don't care about that.
Yeah, that doesn't.
No, that's just so you can't be mad at Kyler Murray.
That's fair.
A lot of teams brought in QBs on rookie deals that we know they're not NFL starters, but it's valuable to have a floor at QB2 on a rookie deal
who has played, especially.
Yeah. I don't hate any of those backup quarterback trade moves, like the Howell move, the Pickett move, the Ridder move. I think they were all smart business.
What about the Mac Jones move?
Mac Jones.
I think that is the smartest quarterback decision a team has made this offseason.
I mean, yeah, like I said, you can't get mad at there can't be any calls for Jones.
We noticed how Trevor Lawrence was basically just going out there and slugging through it, despite him definitely being banged up because he knew if he didn't play, it was over. Now, granted. I think it's still probably over anyway.
Exactly, that was my thing.
But it's less likely than if it was
I think Mac Jones is an objectively good backup QB.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's my point.
I guess I want to see him in another offense outside of New England to see if it's just an incompetent New England thing.
It sort of is, but also Mac Jones just completely unraveled in the face of the adversity that was.
I think if Mac Jones gets his personality straight after the humbling that he's experienced, then he's got a Chase Daniel future ahead of him where he's always going to have a spot in the league. If he gets the personality thing down, he's always going to have a spot because he's good enough.
Yeah. So if Sam Darnold can stick around this long, all Sam Darnold has to do is make a wild throw once a year and he's good. Just one falling away, perfect spiral into the dude's hand. He's good. Then he bought himself 2 more years. It's
throw on the run because everybody just loves that.
The flick. Yeah, it looks great, but anyway. Something I want to talk about too before we finish up. We'll talk a little bit. I know we're running long, but we'll talk about the interior market stuff too. I think one of the more important deals that was signed this offseason, backup quarterback, is Tyrod Taylor to the Jets. I can't leave this conversation without talking about that because one, it means that Zach Wilson doesn't have to play for you, hopefully, right? You hope that whether he's on the team or not, he does not have to play meaningful snaps for you. Or at least he'll be the third option if it gets to that point. It also allows you with Aaron Rodgers, where if it doesn't happen, if his Achilles was too much, if he's too old, whatever, something happens, he gets injured, you have a quarterback that can actually play football, like actual NFL semi-starting football. Like,
Am I the only one that doesn't want to see Tyrod Taylor at MetLife again?
I mean, fair.
I don't want to see
like,
any of those players in MetLife.
Well, like, look, here's
they're gonna have
my
to.
thing. Here's my thing. I totally understand what you're saying, because from a actual playing aspect of backup quarterback, Tyrod Taylor is as solid as they come. When he's able to be on the field, the man has had some of the worst injury luck
Yeah.
in the history of injury luck.
Maybe playing there again, like maybe being there the second, like continuing to be there will just be like the curse breaker. Like,
I hope so.
back here?
I hope so.
All
But
right, we'll just let you play.
I am terrified for that man's long-term health,
he will
for having to
definitely,
play at MetLife a second season.
Like a stray, like someone will be shooting outside the stadium and a stray bullet will hit his knee or something. That's the type of stuff that happens to Tyrod Taylor.
I used to be a backup
doctor
quarterback
stabbing
like
his
you,
lung.
and then I took a
Right.
grazing to the knee.
It's like exactly. But if he does have to play and he plays and like doesn't get hurt, it's a much better situation they had last year. It's if they could actually feasibly field an offense around him and let him.
I
do
mean,
his thing.
they've also done a lot of stuff to invest into the team for next season.
Yep,
the Jets
Joe
are-
Douglas is good for football. As
Yeah.
we said.
I mean, okay, we'll see what happens.
I love the Jets offseason because this
Yeah.
is the most, like, I had a bullet point that I wanted to talk about before we got into topics, but we talked about other stuff and I was good with that. But I'll use this mini segue here to talk about it. So I just have Jets brass has elite awareness. And that is not to say that they are like really good or anything. That is just to say that they are so aware that they are the most pre-fired group that has ever been pre-fired unless they win some playoff games this year. And so what do you need to do that? Just continue investing in the hyper fragile build. Your floor doesn't matter because you're fired. So why not just burn all future resources to just chase the high end tail that they've opened a Super Bowl possibility because of their signings this offseason. They have an objectively great roster when healthy, and we know the defense is going to be elite. They just brought in Hassan Reddick. Like, I love so much that they are just willing to accept that 90% of the time it doesn't work, and they are going to get fired in those scenarios. But they are just aware that they were going to be fired regardless, so why not open up that 10% window where the players stay healthy and it all works? Bringing in Tyron Smith, like, it is so self-aware. They're like Morgan Moses, yeah. It's really cool to me that they're just like, we're going to bet on every injury-prone player because if it hits, we're winning the Super Bowl. If it misses, who the fuck cares? This is somebody else's problem.
Let me tell you about the building of the hyper fragile contender. It falls apart in about week 10, week 11, when a key player like Connor McGovern goes down, and then everybody else starts overexerting and playing, and then they all go down too, the ones that aren't injury prone, and then you're left with signing guys off the street for your playoff game.
Yeah, but like,
not spoken from experience.
That's
or
one of
anything.
the outcomes, Zach.
That's part of the 90%. They're just really smart about probability. They just know that the only way they survive is if they win playoff games, and they have put together a roster capable of that. Whereas if they didn't do all these moves, they would be fired 100% of the time. They've opened up that sliver where they can succeed. And it's self-aware,
a shocking
and so
amount
cool.
of self-awareness, that you don't see in the NFL all the time.
Prediction here, they are going to, so we're talking about backup quarterback trades and everything. They are going to pay somebody a draft pick to take Zach Wilson off their books. And they are going to free up $4.5 million because who cares about that draft pick? We're not the ones drafting, right? Like, that is future GM's problem. We're just going to get $4 million that we can invest into the roster right now. Like, they are just so okay with creating future problems because they probably won't have to deal with them. And I think that is just really cool and really good for football that there are teams recognizing their reality and just swinging for the fucking fences because nothing else matters.
I will say too that I Would you? I know you guys have.
So this is a
rooting
Los
interest in
Angeles
Nuggets.
Rams on steroids.
Kind of.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yes,
Just
aggressively, yes.
sadder, less optimistic. But
Less
still
optimistic.
similar.
Just really
Commercial.
hoping that
Yes.
their bets pay off.
So my thing is like, I know you guys have a rooting interest against this anyway, but like, wouldn't it be much more fun and much easier to root for this team if it ends up being Tyrod Taylor sending them to the playoffs? If that's what happens, because I just can't.
One of
can't
us
deal
has
with Rodgers
experience.
anymore.
It has experience with that.
Yeah. The cool thing about Tyrod Taylor is when he's your backup QB, your floor is really high. But when he's the guy that is actually starting, you accept that the ceiling doesn't exist. So like the reason the Tyrod Taylor signing is good to me is not because if Rodgers goes down for the season, it keeps them alive. No, if Rodgers goes down for the season, they're dead. Like Tyrod Taylor is not going to win you playoff games. But what he does is he keeps you afloat for a couple of games in the regular season. Let's say you want to put Rodgers on the PUP list to start. You can still make the playoffs because you have Tyrod Taylor winning you 2 out of 4 games to start the season. So I think that he bridges the regular season so that you can have a healthy Rodgers in the playoffs. That is what his value add is to me.
So
it's not that it's
Tyrod Taylor.
Winning
Tyrod
playoff
Taylor
games.
is to Brock Osweiler as Brett Favre is. Not, oh gosh, Aaron Rodgers is to Peyton Manning.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know the order of operations there, but I see what you're saying.
Like
It's
Brock.
He's the guy who keeps you afloat so that your Hall of Fame quarterback can be there.
Tyrod Taylor is Brock Osweiler, so that way Aaron Rodgers can be Peyton Manning.
Yes,
I got
yeah,
you.
no, that's a great.
He
goal.
starts the season, then he gets hurt. Tyrod Taylor comes in, gets them to the playoffs. He dwindles down. Then Aaron Rodgers comes back. He's like, "All right, guys, relax. I got this."
Yeah, I will say that, and this is just a personal thing.
I would be so pissed. I would be, because that would blow his head up so much.
Not that
It would blow his
I
head
don't
up
think it'd get any
so
higher than it is.
much.
Here's my thing is like, I really respect the Jets for what they did. I hope it doesn't work because I can't handle
cool.
Aaron Rodgers anymore. Like, and it pisses me off so much because for years, and I still like, just purely from football perspective, I still somewhat agree with this. I advocated for him being the best quarterback I've ever seen play for a long time, and ultimately, I don't give a shit anymore about it because I can't stand the man anymore. Tired of talking about him is what. No, Mahomes obviously is different.
Yeah, I would agree with you that. I mean,
but I'm just saying, like, I can't, like, I want him to fail at this point. I don't care. Like, I want him to crash and burn at this point.
What was the switch? What was the switch that
he started showing his personality?
Yeah, he started
he was
like
pushing to get out of Green Bay, right?
Yeah.
Like he was the darling of just because he was this elite player. He was kind of an asshole in public, but he didn't show enough of his true colors for us to understand the depths of it all. So, like, it was just interesting, and he was really good. And then when he got to New York, he just started showing everybody who he was. And that's when the switch flipped of, like, this isn't fun anymore. Like,
it's awful.
Now
I hate
it's, like, sad. Like,
yeah, it's weird. And
it's annoying. It screams for desperation. Like, it's like, pay attention to me. I have to be the biggest person in the room. Like, and it's just like, yo, shut up. It's not always about you.
Right. Last thing I want to talk about. I don't think there's any other major quarterback things we need to talk about. We'll spend a little bit of time on
being
this.
the answer in Cleveland. I had that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care what the Browns do.
See, again, this is the backup quarterback rule. As if you have a starting quarterback like Deshaun Watson, you have to bring somebody in to where they're not going to clamor for the backup. And they outside of last year, that's why Joe Flacco had to leave, because if you left Joe Flacco on that roster, they were going to call for him.
Is a much more promising starting quarterback option than Joe Flacco.
But they're not going to call for him like they would call for Joe Flacco. Trust me. There's so many examples.
Covered up the quarterback on the screen last year after Joe Flacco started playing games and asked me who that quarterback was based off of where the throws went. It was Jameis Winston.
I understand.
Joe Flacco just played the most Jameis Winston football possible.
But unfortunately,
most of the time,
you can't cover up the quarterback. People are going to see who it is, and there's a very big difference.
I think I know what Zach's trying to say, where it's like, because Flacco just did it for them, it's different. Because Winston hasn't already done it for them, so the fan base isn't as riled up about him.
And I mean, you're also talking
But it's
about
still
former elite Joe Flacco. Like he has the
former
history.
elite.
Or, I mean, he
It was a
labeled by
sarcastic elite. It's like the Riverboat Ron thing. It was
I
made
understand,
in jest.
but
Nobody
like
believed it.
he has the accolades, whereas Jameis Winston doesn't. So you keep somebody like Jameis Winston, who has shown very much mediocrity in the NFL.
Listen, Zach, I'll tell you know what Joe Flacco doesn't have? He doesn't have a 30-35,000.
No, he does not.
Okay.
He doesn't have a
have
crab leg scandal. He doesn't have eating them W's.
Exactly. He doesn't have calling a play for a touchdown against the Falcons the last play of the
That
year.
was amazing. I don't care what anybody says. That was incredible.
Anyway.
Still to this day baffles me that Dennis Allen still has a job.
Listen, man, I don't know. Good for the Saints. Keep going. Keep doing it. Keep doing it as long as you can. I want to see how far this goes. I want Derek Carr to be the quarterback in 2038. I don't care. I just keep going. No, let's talk about the interior market in general. That's kind of one of the biggest shifts I think we saw a little bit, at least, especially in the interior offensive line market a little bit. Those dudes got fucking paid this offseason. Paid in a way that we haven't seen at that position, especially the interior of the offensive line, but also plenty of interior defenders got some cash too. We're talking about, of course, like,
and I think I said something before the show. We nailed the defensive lineman like talks in our last show to where there was no better fit for Chris Jones than Kansas City. So he was going to sign a deal with them no matter what. And it was going to be for a lot of money, deservedly so, which made some of these other teams who were also looking for an interior lineman and had the money made talks with Christian Wilkins easier, to why he also got the contract that he did going to Oakland. So Las Vegas. So we're like, they just kind of opened up everything with those two situations being what they were. And y'all nailed that.
Yeah. The Jones thing was pretty easy to predict, I think. And even the Snead thing, just because we know how the Chiefs are well run, and that was the logical thing to do. And I don't think Jones wanted to be anywhere else. The Wilkins thing is so interesting to me because, like, he got a significant markup on top of the Madubuike contract, which is that's just the market premium. It's what's interesting to me is the team that signed him knows they're not going to be competitive. Like, that's the crazy thing is, so I have what the fuck Vegas. Like, I had what the fuck Denver. Actually, I had what the fuck Vegas in my quarterback thing too. I just didn't feel like getting to it. But
we didn't talk about Gardner Minshew.
Darn.
Oh yeah. No.
But so, like, the fact that it's the Raiders, so they're not gonna compete for a Super Bowl during this contract. But I think there is some innate value to being the most consistent pest, the most consistent thorn in the side of a dynasty. Like, the Raiders know that they are just a team that is playing the dynastic Chiefs, right? They know they're not getting through the division. They know they're not winning a Super Bowl. So why are they spending over $100 million on a defensive tackle who's not going to be on the roster the next time they have a chance to compete for a Super Bowl? It's because him and Max Crosby are going to make Patrick
Mahomes'
so fun,
life those two together
twice a year. And so they are just, like, when we look back on this dynasty, when they make the movies and the documentaries about it,
the Raiders
there's going to be a large section focused on these two defenders just wreaking havoc in Mahomes' life on his way to many Super Bowls. And, like, so that's cool to me. Like, it would have made more sense for him to go, like, sign somewhere they'd compete for a championship. But the fact that he's just like, you know what, these next 4 years, I'm just going to be thorn in Mahomes' side. It's fun. It's very fun.
I can make this joke now. As long as he keeps his fingers out of Mahomes' butt, I don't care.
Oh no, they're going to be firmly in there. Josh Allen can send him that message like,
firmly
hey man, he's
grasping
grabbing your jump for a while.
Oh, he's gonna be firmly grasping.
Firmly grasp it.
Because you just gotta hit Patrick Mahomes. That's how you beat him, right? You just gotta hit Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
anyway,
that's how he has been beaten. Like, why not?
Well, then the whole Antonio Pierce, we're gonna be like the Fab Four, the Fab Four in Detroit and just beat him up.
Another Miami interior player, this time on the offensive side, gets a fucking bag, an
Yeah.
absolute fucking bag from the Panthers. Robert Hunt, 5 years, 100 million. I believe it was guaranteed signing was 36 and a half. The interior offensive line market fucking blew up
Yeah,
between
and this
him
is
and
why
Dotson.
when we had our last show, I was a little upset because of the moves that we were making. However, now that things have come back now, you cannot pay that money to those people. There was only one contract that I was upset about that the Dolphins should have matched, and that was Andrew Van Ginkel, because that was a very doable contract for somebody who was absolutely just shining last season. But no, you cannot give that money to Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt and then also continue to build up the rest of your roster. You had to take some hits. That's fine.
Yeah, and so
I'm cool with that.
that's why like the Panthers and the inverse, right? They're not paying their quarterback yet. They need to make their quarterback work. It made sense to give him 20 per. Like I think Robert Hunt has a chance to live up to that contract. I don't think he's automatically a value on it, but I think he has a chance to live up to it. And so important for the Panthers specifically is when you have a short quarterback, interior pressure matters so much. And so like so you bring in Robert Hunt, you bring in Damian Lewis, you now have two of the meanest run blocking guards in the NFL on your team. And so you are taking so much. One, they're going to really build through the run game in Carolina. So like that makes a ton of sense. Also now, Bryce Young has more confidence to hang in the pocket and see his receivers open. And like granted, they have to bring in the receivers who can get open. But it just made so much sense, their approach to the interior, because of who their quarterback is. It's like that's the piece of the offense that like those two positions need to work if Bryce Young is going to turn out fine. So why not just burn money on it? Like
That's kind of the thing is like, especially also you got to look at the Rams and what they did. They are just buying into the Dotson was great for them. Let's resign him. Bring in Jonah Jackson, I think it was, right?
Yeah,
They
I
bring in
didn't
Jonah
love that
Jackson.
contract because like now you're shifting Avila to center when he was a standout left guard last year. You don't need to allocate all that money to the interior,
right?
That
I
feels like
think
a
it
lot.
tells you exactly what they think about what they're going to do again on offense.
Oh, yeah.
Is they're going to run Kyron Williams
Run
into the
fucking
ground.
rock.
They're going to play action off that. And they're going to dime people up down the field with Stafford and Cobb and Nakua. Like, I think it's going to work really well. It's just, again, is it the best allocation of resources long term? Probably not. But I think it's going to be a really fun team to watch next year on offense, I'll tell you that much. But I think they also realize like they have to elevate their offense a little bit because they're losing Donald too. And, you know, as much as Turner was really good as a rookie, he's not going to be Aaron Donald. So that's just, you know, non-starter. Maybe they do bring in, like you mentioned, Tony, like a Byron Murphy or someone in the interior with their first round pick, which I would definitely be totally for. I think probably corner and edge are still big needs. I know Tre'Davious White got brought over, but how many games is he going to play for you? I don't know. It's interesting the way that they did that. And I think also, like, granted, this is a player that's more established and a guy that like has made a lot of money before too, but Leonard Williams, 21.5 million.
Yeah, that's a dumb contract. I don't like
but again, like that's
the Seahawks had to do it because
Yeah.
of what they traded for him. Like they told
Right.
us all they were going to do this at the trade deadline when they gave up a second and a fifth.
Yep.
But that's a lot of
It's
money
a lot
for
of
a
money.
guy who doesn't he is objectively a very good high floor player, but I just don't know if
How much
he's
does he move the
providing you
needle?
the
Yeah.
upside that
right.
comes with that kind of money.
Exactly. But again, the interior guys, man, they just got a ton of money. And I
Oh.
think go ahead,
Yeah.
Zach. Sorry.
Oh no, you keep going. The interior guys got a lot of money.
Yeah, they got a ton of money, and I think there's always been this idea, right, that like interior pressure matters a ton because of how quick it gets there, and it's more impactful than edge rush can be at times. We haven't always really seen that work out in terms of draft value, in terms of free agent dollars, and this year it did. And you know, I think part of that is obviously like Aaron Donald's reign over the past 10 years. Part of that is Chris Jones' impact for the Chiefs. Like, I think that the top end guys have started to kind of help trickle down into the other players in that group that do provide some of that as well. But I do wonder, like, is this going to continue? Is this a trend that's going to continue for a while? Or is this something that is going to be more of a one-off? I tend to think it's going to continue. But it's interesting that we're finally kind of seeing that catch up.
Yeah, no, I sorry. I just saw his name. And I'm standing on this opinion. Jadeveon Clowney is the defensive version of Kirk Cousins, just continually getting some sort of bag every single season and
He had a good
sticking
year in
around.
Baltimore, so I get it.
Yeah, yeah, and now he's signing a nice little deal with Carolina. So,
I thought
This
he
is
was
his
going to
first multi-year deal in like the
a
last 6 years.
while. I thought he
yeah,
was going to travel with McDonald personally, but he was already there before. But I get it. Yeah.
I'm not surprised he wanted to head home to
Yes.
Carolina. It sounds like he's
Yeah.
trying to get Gilmore there too, both
Yeah. So
out of Rock Hill. On the interior thing, part of the reason I think that it's exploding is we have seen, like, as much as we all care about edge pressure and tackles, the elite quarterbacks are more disrupted by interior
yes,
pressure than they
are
by edge
exactly.
pressure. Like
Exactly.
the Mahomes, the Allens, the Lamars of the world, they can, if they know somebody's coming hot off the edge, they can erase that. They can account for that themselves, and it's no big deal. Your edge is now washed out of the game. But when they get that quick interior pressure, that's when those elite quarterbacks kind of crash and burn. Like Josh Allen, yeah, big time. Like the fumble because Christian Wilkins in the Miami game to close out the season, like that is the best quarterbacks are more impacted by interior pressure than edge pressure lately. And so that's why I think the market's exploding. And then on top of that, the position scarcity. Like it's hard to get an elite D tackle outside of drafting one in the first round. They rarely hit free agency. Christian Wilkins is a very unique scenario where the Dolphins just didn't have the capital to like tag him and trade him even. Like so I think it's so hard to find them that anytime a guy comes due for money, the money's gonna be there. So like that's why I don't think this is a flash in the pan. I think this is just a trend that will continue. And then we're seeing the guard market catch up to that because they're like, well, shit, everybody's got the best teams have these elite D tackles, and we got like a $1.2 million flyer because we just tried to plug and place a guard. Like that's why you're seeing the crazy absorbent guard contracts, and probably a little rich for my blood. Like, does Landon Dickerson really command $21 million? No, he's a really good guard, but he's not stopping. So that's. I think I still want to kind of play on the margins on the guard side of things, like draft rather than pay. But at D tackle, that's where you draft and you pay. Like you cannot afford to miss out. Like as much as Miami could, like they couldn't afford that contract, but they should have done things to prepare themselves to be able to afford that contract, because having Christian Wilkins at 25 per is better than not having Christian Wilkins. And like that's like the Bills got Ed Oliver done at 17, and holy shit, what a value that is. Granted, he's nowhere near the Quinnen Williams, Christian Wilkins tier, but like he's the next tier down, and he's paying off that contract because you don't find those guys out there. You have to draft them. You have to draft them early. So that's I think why the market's exploding, and I think will continue to explode. Is they're just hard to find, and they're so damn important in today's NFL.
That's kind of the ultimate thing. I think, like I said, is it's very clear that for you to be able to affect the offenses that are winning playoff games, Super Bowls, the quarterbacks that are doing it, you have to be able to get pressure, and it can't just be from the edge, like you said. They, especially with the Allens of the world and the Mahomes, like they are just too slippery and too athletic at times for you to be able to guarantee that even if you win off the edge, that you're going to get them down, right? With the interior pressure, it's just much harder to navigate that. You can't reset in the pocket as easily. You can't find space as easily. Right. Like you kind of, now you're going back, and now the edge rushers are coming because now you have to retreat backwards. And it's something we've always known. And I think the NFL, like from a market standpoint, has finally kind of caught up to that. And now we're getting that point, which is why I think a guy like Byron Murphy, a guy like Johnny Newton in this draft, like they're going to be valued heavily and may be taken a little earlier than people expect because of that, right? Like teams that maybe need an edge rusher are going to say, well, we kind of think our edge rushers are okay, but our interior is not that great. Maybe we take the swing on the high profile pass rusher in the interior instead. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out in the draft too, not just in free agency. So, but we definitely have given enough of a spiel, I think, about the offseason. We covered a lot of the stuff. We'll continue to talk about stuff as we lead up to the draft. Like I said, Zach, I will not make any specific draft videos with you guys. We'll not do specific. Well, we might talk a little bit about it, obviously, as we get closer.
Oh, we can do like one mock draft. One
Right.
is fine.
We'll do stuff related to it. But in general, if you guys want to see that tomorrow and every Sunday, hopefully through the end of the draft, including the day of the draft and some of the days after that, we will be doing streams for around the draft here with ATB, where I host the scouting podcast. Have guys come on. We're going to do our top 10 edge rushers this week, actually, tomorrow. So that'll be fun. I kind of still debating on some of the lower end guys and the guys at the top, but we'll see. But
if you're itching for some football action, the UFL starts today.
Does it?
Yes. Kickoff is
Man.
today.
It's so weird move. Just like it's the Elite Eight. Like I'm not watching that shit.
I mean,
Yeah.
but
I
I do like the decision for them to merge. The XFL and USFL thing was not working. But yeah,
Nope.
today you got 2 games, 1 at 1, 1 at 4. Birmingham Stallions and Renegades. Those are your 2 USFL XFL champions facing off, and then the second game is Michigan Panthers and St. Louis Battlehawks. So
Okay.
yeah.
I will probably see what happened.
Yeah. There's some interesting stuff. I'm more excited tomorrow for the Memphis Showboats and Case Cookus.
Case Cookus.
Case Cookus.
Minnesota preseason legend.
Yeah, there's.
Yep.
I was really shocked by the amount of names I knew on the rosters when I was looking at them, but I also remember that I'm just a degenerate, and that's probably why I know the names. It's not because there's some that are like, yeah.
There's quite a few. I think
Matt Corral
was specifically
right?
Matt Corral's on the team, right?
Yeah, Birmingham has Scooby Wright, which like everybody.
Oh
knows
yeah,
Scooby Wright.
Scooby Wright.
He's been there for
Arizona legend.
2 seasons. Darius Victor is another name that's been a little popular. Wayne Gallman is on a team this year.
Former Giant, Clemson.
Yeah, Hakeem Butler is in the is on a team.
As he was before. Nice.
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys like that it's just like this probably seems right.
Yeah, I'll definitely I'll pay attention to it. I don't know. We'll see how much I watch of it, but as much.
DC has a team. I'd like to go to a game eventually.
That's fair.
I was gonna try to go to one in 2020, but then COVID. So
yeah. So, but
be a part of the beer snake.
Yeah. All right, that'll do it for us this week. The guys will be back hopefully next week. I think we're good for next week at least.
Yes.
With Zach having like a better job, like this guy, like now we have to
I work during the daytime now.
Right. Yeah, but we'll be back next week. Should be the same time, and then we'll kind of figure it out from there. But thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next time.